An Arkansas couple is under arrest after police found their 7-year-old son nearly dead from starvation. And despite being rescued, the child is reportedly barely hanging on. We're digging into the charges the couple now face and what will happen to their 2 other children. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Elizabeth Millner, filling in for Jesse Weber. A 7-year-old boy is in critical condition as of the time of this recording on Friday morning, July 18th, at Children's Hospital in Little Rock, Arkansas, because of what medical professionals are calling severe, prolonged malnutrition. When authorities searched the little boy's house in Russville, they found that the home was unfit for children. Despite that, it appears multiple children were living there. 39-year-old Chris Freeman and his 27-year-old wife, Caitlin, are now facing felony child abuse charges after police found a closet in their house had been converted into a makeshift room where the 7-year-old and a 5-year-old were tied up with a rope. According to testimony heard in court by the Northwest Arkansas Democrat Gazette, a 3-year-old also lived there. The 3-year-old and 5-year-old are now reportedly in foster care. A judge set the bond for the Freemans at $100,000 cash. If they do make bail, they do have to wear electronic monitoring bracelets, can't contact any of their family members or children, and can't be around kids at all. The couple were charged on July 15th with a count each of first-degree battery and endangering the welfare of a minor. According to Arkansas criminal statute, battery in the first degree is a Class B felony. Charging documents read, quote, "The said defendant in Pope County did unlawfully and feloniously on or about July 15, 2025, commit battery in the first degree, that he or she knowingly caused serious injury to another person under circumstances manifesting extreme indifference to the value of a human life." Now, the battery charge carries a sentence of about 5 to 20 years in prison. The endangering the welfare of a minor charge is a Class D felony, meaning the suspects could face up to 6 years if convicted. From the charging document, quote, "The said defendant in Pope County did unlawfully and feloniously on or about July 15, 2025, commit the offense of endangering the welfare of a minor in the first degree. If being a parent, guardian, person legally charged with care or custody of a minor, he or she purposely engages in conduct creating a substantial risk of death or serious physical injury to a minor." Now, I want to go through some of the testimony from the Freeman's bond hearing, where Lieutenant Quinn Jones of the Russville Police Department Criminal Investigation Division testified about the case. The Freemans took their 7-year-old son to a local hospital on Tuesday, July 15th, where medical staff reportedly said he was so emaciated that his ribs were protruding and that he was so pale that you could see his bones through his skin. He weighed only 28 pounds and was 40 inches tall, much shorter than average. And according to the CDC, a healthy 7-year-old boy is between 40 and 71 pounds, so that's obviously a huge discrepancy. Now, the child was rushed to the Children's Hospital, where his status as of this recording is critical. Lieutenant Jones testified that Caitlin Freeman told medical staff at the hospital that the boy had been awake and was walking fine, a dubious claim given his current condition. She said he had been having gastrointestinal issues for, quote, a while, and had not been to a pediatrician because his previous doctor retired. Lieutenant Jones said in court, quote, "Doctors at Children's described the juvenile as malnourished with little muscle mass and described the situation as a near fatality. The doctor stated the juvenile would have been malnourished for several years in order to be in the condition that he was in." Arkansas State Police were also part of the investigation and discovered that the boy was last seen by a doctor in 2021. Again, this is 2025 now. The boy was already malnourished then, and Lieutenant Jones testified a DHS investigation was started, but it's unclear what happened from there. According to Russville Police, it appears that the children were left tied up inside the small closet in the home often. There was urine and feces on the floor, and horrifyingly, investigators found scratch marks on the wall where it appears that somebody was trying to get out. Medical staff reported that the 7-year-old had scratches on his knuckles, consistent with clawing at a wall. The 3-year-old and 5-year-old, according to police, also had signs of malnourishment, but not as severe as the 7-year-old. There was reportedly plenty of food in the home, as well as several $1,000s in cash. Lieutenant Jones testified that Caitlin told investigators she knew that Chris would sometimes tie the 7-year-old's feet and wrists with a rope and leave him in the closet, blocking the door with a toddler bed so that he couldn't, quote, have a break. The night before the child was taken to the hospital, Caitlin Freeman reportedly got home from work around 8 p.m. and knew that the boy was still inside the closet. He stayed there until Chris opened the door in the morning and found him unresponsive, according to Lieutenant Jones's testimony. According to the Arkansas news outlet KARK, the Freemans admitted to detectives that they didn't take the boy to a doctor because of fear of embarrassment and repercussions. Now, the investigation is ongoing and more charges could be filed. Russellville Police Chief David Ewing told KARK, "There is no denying that this shook us to our core. I mean, he was basically just a skeleton with skin on it." To talk about the disturbing details of this case, I want to bring in family law attorney Jennifer Roman. Jennifer, thank you so much for speaking with me. Now, Jennifer, I will say one thing. These parents, surprisingly to me, are lucky that their 7-year-old son is even still alive, because reading that a 7-year-old was less than 30 pounds and allegedly locked up in a closet, to me, is just unfathomable. And as a prosecutor, have you seen a case like this before?
No. I mean, things come close, right?
Mm-hmm.
But this clearly went on for a number of years, and the allegations are just so incredibly horrific and frankly hard to get your mind around. How could two parents do this to their child? And what really sort of troubled me was that they apparently said to the investigators that they didn't bring him to the hospital earlier because they were afraid of repercussions and embarrassed.
Like, I
And it
would
took me
rather take embarrassment over just not reporting at all. Like, that just,
right.
yeah.
And by the time they did take him in, the doctors were reporting the child was nearly dead. I
Yeah.
mean, he was just wasting away from malnutrition, and that is just horrifying. Horrifying.
And it's heartbreaking too, because, and sadly, here at Law&Crime, we've seen cases like this before where it does go to that extreme of a child could have easily have died from this. Again, less than 30 pounds, I think 28 pounds, 7-year-old boy, just terrible. And obviously, we would be having a different conversation if that child didn't make it out alive. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that they brought him in when they did. Maybe the parents recognized that he was really failing, and that was what tipped them over to get over their quote unquote embarrassment of what they had done to this poor child. Um, but if it was a fatality, then it would be a capital offense in
Yeah.
Arkansas, and they would be facing the death penalty.
And they're, again, can't emphasize, like, in this case, I'm surprised I'm saying that they're lucky, but they are lucky because, again,
Mhm.
this could have ended in such a terrible way. And it did end in a terrible way because now a boy has to go through what next could be survival and just all the healing that he has to go through even after this, and done by his own parents too, no less. And then I think another thing that stood out to me in this case, Jennifer, is what the police chief said, that there was money found in the home, there was an abundance of food found in the home, so this really didn't need to happen. I want to thank Odoo for sponsoring this episode of Sidebar. Odoo is a powerful all-in-one business software that helps you manage everything from sales to accounting and, yes, manufacturing. Schedule your production, manage your assembly line, and fine-tune your work orders with Odoo all-in-one easy-to-use platform. Need fully assembled manufacturing software that puts you ahead of your business schedule? Well, Odoo has you covered. Plus, Odoo's manufacturing app syncs seamlessly with your sales, inventory, and purchasing modules, so everything stays connected and running smoothly. Check out Odoo to take your manufacturing process to the next level and get a free 15-day trial today at odoo.com/sidebarmanufacturing.
This was very intentional.
Yeah.
He and the signs of wear on the little room that they were allegedly keeping him in. The police made note that the hardware seemed to be kind of worn down from repeated use. There were markings on the wall that suggest that somebody had been in there for a while, and there was human waste. There was feces and urine on the floor in that little room where he was allegedly kept, and so it really becomes a very intentional crime. And there were other children in the home who were not in the same state as this 7-year-old, thankfully.
Yeah.
But one of the children did say that the parents were employing similar tactics against the 5-year-old child as well. All the children now are in protective custody and will be with foster families while this gets sorted out, and will likely never return to their biological parents, given the level of abuse and frankly torture that happened here.
And obviously, these cases are difficult and they're difficult to discuss, and it ends up affecting so many people from the victims, other family members, responding officers, medical personnel, and more. So I'm curious to know, talk to me a little bit about how these cases are even handled, kind of from the start of a case like this to what would be kind of your level into like the prosecution office.
Yeah, these cases proceed very similarly to how any other criminal investigation would proceed, right? It comes to attention of law enforcement, they move in and they start investigating. Where we have minor children who are the key witnesses and the alleged victim, they're handled, with care and in a professional manner so that the interviewers who will be talking to the children will not be inflicting further trauma on them, but rather allowing them to disclose their story in an age appropriate manner, whether that's through some play using dolls to say, show me what mom and dad would do if the child became angry, what would happen, and letting them sort of demonstrate it. Also, these investigators also know, because they've been trained to work with children, they know when to push and when to pull back. And so it's not nearly as an aggressive as an investigation as it may be if we were talking about competent adults. It is handled more carefully and delicately, which also means it could take more time to really investigate this. A lot of this case, I think, is going to turn to on what the parents do and do not say. They've already made some admissions to investigators from what we've been hearing. And so those admissions will be used against them. And then if they disclose more details about what actually happened and for how long it went for, then that could be used against them too down the road. It seems like right now this would be very surprising if this case actually went to trial. I think that the evidence seems so strong and so compelling that these parents would be much better off accepting responsibility earlier on in exchange for, hopefully, from their perspective, a lighter sentence. But they may not. They may choose to fight this and think that they have a chance. But I think that's unlikely. I think, given they've already made admissions and that they brought the child to the hospital, something tipped them over the edge that allowed them to actually do the right thing after doing the wrong thing for so long.
Right.
And I think that that's, in one regard, a good sign that they will accept responsibility and that this will not be protracted, which would be beneficial, to these children who need to heal and to move on, both physically and mentally.
And because this went on for years, and I just can't emphasize that enough, years, I'm curious why, when charging a case like this, why the charge might not be like attempted murder. Is it because of the whole intent issue and the defense can possibly argue there was no intent to murder this child?
Yeah, I mean, the investigators have said that more charges could be coming. And I think when they start to hear more information, if the child is able to talk about some of the things that he experienced, if the other children are able to, particularly the older child, are able to talk about what they saw, this may turn into something different. The attempted murder charge would be very difficult in this case because it was so systematic and long term that it's kind of like at any point along that multi-year continuum where they were doing this to the child, you kind of have to figure out at what point did it become a risk of him dying? At what point was it reasonable to assume that he would die? I think when they got to that point where it looked like he really was failing, again, according to the doctors, he was on the brink of death, then they came forward and got him medical treatment. And that simple fact alone would probably prevent an attempted murder charge from coming out against them. However, if this child does not make it, despite medical interventions, they will be charged with murder.
And that makes complete sense. And we know that Caitlin spoke with detectives telling them that it was actually Chris was the one who locked up the little boy in that closet. Does that do her any type of favors here?
Possibly, if she cooperates with the prosecution, she might be able to negotiate a lighter sentence for herself. But the reality of it is she's negligent by turning a blind eye to it or not stopping it. right? She had the authority to go to leave that house, call the police, call a neighbor and ask them, call child services. I mean, there were so many things that she could have done, even if she herself didn't make the phone call to authorities. She could have done things. What's also interesting too is that this child doesn't appear to have been in the school system.
Yeah.
And because if he was, this would have been picked up on much earlier, right? Teachers would have noticed, staff would have noticed, guidance counselors would have noticed, people in the community would be saying that child's too thin to be just underweight, right? There would have been some concerns. And so that sort of the fact that it happened behind closed doors, and that it could happen behind closed doors because it doesn't seem like he was in the community, really contributed to the parents' ability to allow this to be prolonged. But the mother certainly has culpability, even if she wasn't the one who physically turned the key on that door. She was definitely aiding and assisting the father in doing this. And then by virtue of not saying anything to anyone, makes her culpable for this.
Right. And then just to think about the 7-year-old boy went through what he had gone through, and then just detectives also indicating that the 3-year-old and the 5-year-old also showed signs of abuse, but not as severe as their older brother. But is that something that you may have possibly seen a lot in these types of cases, that maybe one victim gets kind of the brunt of the suspect's or defendant's anger and mistreatment?
It can happen. I mean, we do see it. Usually abuse is more systematic though. So if one child's being abused, then chances are the other ones are being abused as well. It will be interesting to see if a more developed timeline can come out for this. I mean, was there a period of time where he was being properly nourished and cared for? Or did this start at a certain age when maybe he became more vocal, more defiant, asserting his independence more, and that somehow challenged the authority of the parents? Because that's what kids do, right? But maybe to these parents it seemed like too much, or they couldn't handle it. Um, it could be one of those things, but we generally see if one child's being abused that the other children are. And sometimes it's the physical abuse may be less, but the emotional trauma is still there. The emotional abuse is still there because they are witnessing their sibling being abused, and in this case, frankly, I call it tortured. That has an emotional, a psychological impact on the siblings as well. So no matter whether you look at it from a physical standpoint or emotional standpoint, there is a level of abuse that's going to happen across the board when this kind of systematic abuse is happening at home.
And say, for instance, this case does end up going to trial. Is it possible that the 7-year-old boy will have to testify?
Unlikely, because he's so young. It would be a question of competency. And that sort of depends on how developed he is mentally, which probably suffered from the lack of nutrition and the emotional and physical abuse that he suffered. So if he was determined to be competent, meaning that he can understand right from wrong, he can tell the truth, he understands the difference between a truth and a lie, then yes, it's possible that he could testify. What I think is more likely to happen here, and we've sort of already seen this indication, is that the mother is going to cooperate and testify against the husband. And I don't know if Arkansas has a spousal disqualification privilege the way that we do here in other states. But if there is a possibility that she could testify and cooperate for the prosecution, then I think that's what would happen. So she would take a lesser sentence. And the father, if he is in fact the one who was really sort of the mastermind and the perpetrator of this horrific abuse, meaning like really he's the one who turned the key, he's the one who tied the ropes, as opposed to her standing by and letting it happen, then I think she probably will, because it will save her. She'll come out of this with a much lighter sentence.
Just going back to just this overall horrendous story, it feels also kind of deliberate in the sense that they were keeping young children specifically inside the home. Because like you had mentioned before, it's unclear if the children were enrolled in school where they might have had somebody who would be able to report this type of thing, but also keeping the children locked up so that way possibly the neighbors wouldn't see them. But do you think it's possible that maybe it was kind of like an unknown secret inside the neighborhood, or maybe that they did this purposely, putting these kids in isolation and putting them in what feels like a torture home pretty much, just in order to not have people see what they're doing. But then at the same time, they're also saying that, oh, we were just embarrassed to report this. We didn't want to get in trouble, that type of thing.
It feels very deliberate and it feels very intentional, which to me suggests that they were keeping the children out of the community to hide this.
Yeah.
It is always hard to know. People tend to be reluctant to step up and say things unless they have the facts to support what they're saying. But I would like to believe that if the neighbors are seeing a child that they know to be more than 1 or 2 years old who looks emaciated, that they would raise, that they would start to ring the bell. But it's hard to say. However, the 28 pounds at 7 years old, I mean, I'm not a physician, but I have children, and it's like, that's like a 1-year-old,
Yeah.
maybe a 1.5-year-old. So this really does seem like it went on for a very, very long time. And I think it was very intentional. It was very deliberate. It was very hidden. Because outwardly, although the home was reportedly very cluttered, there was food, there was money.
Yeah.
But then there was also this room, right, that was not in the full, if you walked into the home, you weren't going to see it. You weren't going to observe that right away. So it does feel very methodical and deliberate to keep this a secret.
Right, especially with the whole idea that there was food around. This wasn't a situation, not to negate those types of situations either, but it wasn't a situation that they were wanting for food and they were in desperate need for food, especially given the fact that this was going on for years. This wasn't like, oh, this was after 2 months or a week. Not that, again, that makes that any better, but it just seems so deliberate, and it's quite frankly disturbing what these parents are accused of doing to very young children. Jennifer Roman, I want to thank you so much for your time and your insight into this case. Before we sign you off, though, if you have a crystal ball, do you think that this case is going to end in a plea deal, or do you think it's possible that, they could decide to go the other route and go through trial?
I think it's going to end in a plea deal. I think the risks to them to go to trial, these are felony offenses that carry a very significant potential prison sentence. And if they can negotiate something lighter for themselves, then I think that would be in their best interests. And so I do think we're going to be looking at a plea deal. And I think, as ironic as this may sound, I'm actually a little bit encouraged that they did actually bring the child to the doctor. Like, yes, it took however long it took. It should have never gotten to that point. It's absolutely horrific. But they did do it. And so to me, and they have talked to investigators. And so to me, that says there's some recognition on their part, however small, that this was wrong. And now they're trying to pull back a little bit and protect themselves more. And that may actually be a blessing for this child. I mean, if there can be, and for their other children, if there can be a swifter resolution to this, then it will allow everyone, those children, to get the supports they need, get the proper care that they need, and hopefully start to heal emotionally and physically. And I think the sooner that can happen, the better for those young children.
And I hope that they're able to recover from this emotionally, mentally, physically, because again, these just allegations are just horrible and horrendous. Jennifer Roman, again, thank you so much for your time and your insight into this case. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
Thanks so much for joining us today, and subscribe to us anywhere you get your podcasts, whether it's YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. I'm Elizabeth Millner, filling in for Jesse Weber, and this has been Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime.